for joining us for our latest edition of our Western Rivers Action Network Summer Webinar Series. I see we have a lot of our regulars on the line, and I also see a bunch of new names, so I just want to start off by thanking everyone for being with us today. A few housekeeping things. Be aware that I've muted everyone's line as you signed on to the call today. That's just so we can hear our speakers and we don't get a whole lot of feedback. Feel free to use the chat box in that window that GoToMeeting produces for you. You can put questions there, and we will get to them at the end, and we'll also open up the lines at that point. Today our topic is going to be Arizona's native trout program. To keep ourselves motivated, it's always good to remind ourselves that we're doing this sometimes kind of onerous policy work for the fish, the wildlife, the habitats that can't speak up for themselves. So I'm really glad we were able to get this topic on the calendar this time around. We're extremely fortunate to have two trout experts on the line to guide us through. First, we have Julie Carter. Julie is the Native Trout Conservation Program Manager for the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and she comes to this work with a bachelor's in wildlife and fisheries biology from NAU, a master's in fisheries science from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, 8 years of fisheries experience with the USGS in Alaska, and 11 years experience at the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Also on the line, we have Brad Powell. Brad is the Southwest Regional Director of Trout Unlimited, and he's also the President of the Arizona Wildlife Federation. To these positions, he brings a lifelong passion for fishing in the outdoors, a degree in forestry from the University of Missouri, and over 30 years of experience with the Forest Service. With the U.S. Forest Service, he worked as a forest supervisor in Alaska and Kentucky, a national monument manager at Mount St. Helens, and as sort of in various resource management assignments across the western United States. Currently, he's been with Trout Unlimited for the last 9 years. With that, I'm going to pass the wheel over to Julie. Are you there, Julie?
I'm here. Thank you, Steve.
Awesome.
Let me know when my screen is up. Okay.
All right. We've got you on.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today on the lunch hour. I'm actually giving this presentation on behalf of Mike Anderson, who's our native trout coordinator, but he's having a really great time fishing for trout and salmon in Alaska right now. So I'm going to be giving this presentation, and I used to be the native trout coordinator, so I'm very familiar with the topic, but hopefully I can keep up with everything that Mike's been doing. How this relates to the Western Rivers Action Network series that Audubon is presenting is basically the success of all of our recovery efforts on Apache and Gila trout, of course, depend on healthy watersheds. And over the years, even in just my short tenure with the department for the last 11 years, we've seen a lot of impacts from non-native species, drought, wildfire, post-wildfire flooding. And I just want to acknowledge all of the agencies and organizations and the public that put time and effort into contributing to the recovery of the trout. I have a few names up here of the agencies. We use a lot of volunteer effort from Trout Unlimited and Federation of Fly Fishers too. So today I'm going to give a little background on our native trout recovery program for the department and talk about the Gila trout just in Arizona, the status and some upcoming projects, the same for Apache trout, and then talk about our department's Arizona Trout Challenge. So this map is Arizona and New Mexico, and the purple highlighted areas are historical range of Gila trout. So in New Mexico, it's mostly in the upper Gila River Basin and the San Francisco River Basin, while in Arizona, we're a little bit more spread out. So we have the Blue River, Chitty Creek. We actually have some areas that are not on this map that are down here and up here, East Verde River, and then we have Verde River and Agua Fria River. And for perspective, this is the range, much smaller range of the Apache trout native to the White, Black, and Little Colorado drainages in Arizona. So our department has an approach to native trout recovery. We've had a native trout biologist, I believe, since probably around 2000, working on just Gila and Apache trout recovery. And our overall goal is to protect, enhance, and recover Apache and Gila trout populations in their habitats and increase the numbers of fishable populations. So for Gila trout, they were originally listed as endangered in 1973 and then downlisted to threatened in 2006. And we follow a recovery plan from 2003 that guides all of our actions. And for Apache trout, they were also listed as endangered in 73 but downlisted in 1975. And we also follow a recovery plan for those actions, which I'll get into a little bit now. And our overall recovery strategy for both species is we try to implement actions that are going to meet recovery criteria. So in every recovery plan, there is a goal to get to a threatened status or get to no listed status, and that's the delisting status. So we try to achieve the criteria that are going to get us to delisting and ultimate recovery of the species. We try to create fisheries and also to increase angling opportunities. Folks like Trout Unlimited have been really strong partners over many, many years in this particular avenue, and it really helps to get public support for native trout populations when you're able to do some kind of recreational angling as well. And then we're constantly looking for new streams, new habitats, monitoring existing habitats, and going through prioritization efforts with all of the different agencies, and with Gila trout with both states, New Mexico and Arizona. And a lot of our time and Mike's time and our partners' times are wrapped up in environmental compliance, because every time you want to do a project for native trout recovery or restoration, it's going to involve some kind of environmental compliance, such as building a barrier or doing a pesticide treatment to remove non-native fish. And those can take a really long time, as many of you that I've seen your names on that are listening today know very well. Okay, so now I'll go into a little bit further into Gila recovery and Gila trout recovery and the status today. In Arizona, we have two of the recovery units that are in our state. So the first is the San Francisco River Recovery Unit, which is real small there, you can see in the red, and it's in New Mexico and Arizona. And this is for the Spruce Creek lineage of Gila trout. The Spruce Creek lineage, it's all in New Mexico right now. And the recovery goal for delisting is to restore Spruce Creek lineage fish in 15 populations with over 50 miles of stream, and the status right now is only 2 populations. And there are a number of reasons for that, and I'll go into some of those. And then we have the Gila River, San Francisco River mixed lineages. So for that goal, that encompasses the rest of the drainages in Arizona. The goal is 4 populations in 25 miles of stream, and the status right now is that we have 4 populations. We don't have quite the numbers of miles of stream, so we're trying to achieve more population so that we can get to that mileage. So current status in the San Francisco Recovery Unit, this is a close-up of the Blue River drainage. So here's New Mexico, here's the reference map. And these are some of the streams that we've been considering for Gila trout recovery for many years. Raspberry Creek here, which I have my pointer on, was actually stocked with Gila trout back in 2000. But unfortunately, the wallow fire, this whole watershed here on this western side was impacted by the wallow fire and was in the wallow fire perimeter. So many of these streams were impacted by that fire, and we lost that small population of Gila trout. So Mike has these color-coded as far as, like, blue are the fishless streams, so we have Chitty Creek, KP Creek, and Raspberry Creek. All the way up here we have Coleman Creek in Buckaloo. We have one here, Lamphir, that's a potential stream, but it needs a barrier to be constructed. Grant Creek right here is a really solid potential Gila trout recovery stream, but it does need a barrier maintenance, and it does need a pesticide treatment to remove the non-native trout that are currently there. And KP is a fishless stream, and we just need to work on the barrier. And Shitty Creek over here has been really heavily impacted by fires, so we're just letting it recover right now. In that recovery unit, here are some of the projects that Mike has been working on and others have been working on. Raspberry Creek, we're going to monitor the barrier and hopefully stock Gila trout in there next year. As well as in Coleman Creek, there's an existing habitat restoration project going in there that has been led by the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, where they're trying to get the habitat back in shape after the Wallow fire, and then we'll introduce fish. KP Creek needs a barrier modification before stocking, and so that's a little bit further into the future, as well as Grant Creek. And then we're also, our department's going to be working on Blue River Watershed Management Plan. And this will help us prioritize which streams are going to be appropriate for Gila trout, as well as other native and non-native fish. Some of the challenges that we've experienced in this recovery unit, as I mentioned, the Wallow fire in 2011 and Shitty Creek fire in 2007, really impacted some of our streams. And this doesn't eliminate all of the possibilities for Gila trout in them, but in some of them that with this, where they're more severe, it just caused a little bit of a delay. We've also had some drought issues, so many of our streams that maybe 20 years ago folks thought could be, eligible or suitable for Gila trout recovery are no longer very suitable because of drought. And so we're constantly doing a lot of monitoring, and Mike Anderson has been really good about having temperature loggers all over the state in native trout habitat, looking to make sure that these waters are suitable for trout. And then we've also had challenges with the Spruce Creek lineage. So that entire Blue River watershed and Upper San Francisco watershed is only supposed to be restored with the Spruce Creek lineage fish. But they're only in 2 streams in New Mexico, and recent genetic analysis have found that there has been quite a bit of inbreeding, and they're not very genetically diverse. So right now we have fisheries scientists and geneticists working on this lineage to also try to make this population, this lineage, more robust so that we can use them in the future for all these restoration projects. So we also think about considering other lineages in these projects, just depending on the status of the genetics analysis. So next, for the mixed lineage recovery unit, these streams right here, this is the map near Safford. These are all on the Mount Graham area, the Pinaleno Mountain. We have 2 occupied streams, Fry Creek and Ash Creek, so those actually have Gila trout in them, and Fry Creek was open to angling just recently. For the first time, it's the first recovery stream, wild stream, that was open to angling in the state history. And then Mike has been working on a mechanical removal of Mary Hilda Creek. So up here where he has circled, this is where he's had crews out electrofishing. There's a hybrid population of Apache trout and rainbow trout, because Apache trout and rainbows were stocked here back in the 1960s. So we're trying to do mechanical removal, and the rest of the drainage is fishless. So we're hoping to continue this project, verify that it's fishless, and then be able to stock Gila trout. This would get us a lot of miles right there, as it's a bigger stream. And the other San Francisco mixed unit streams that are, some of these are occupied and some are potential. So Hagler Creek up here on the left is a potential recovery stream. We've been working on that as a potential recovery stream since 2007. It's been a complex project because it involves a barrier and It's just taken a number of years, but we've been working on it as much as we can, and we're still really interested for Higgler Creek as a Gila trout stream in the future. We also have Grapevine Creek, which is a tributary to the Agua Fria. It's a very small creek, established back in 2009. And then just recently, last year, Dude Creek, which had historically had Gila trout back in 2000, but they never took and then were extirpated after a flood. So just last year, for the first time, about 1,000 fish were stocked into Dude Creek. And then Mike has also been working in the Chiricahua Mountains looking at this Cave Creek complex. There was a fire. It killed most of the fish in the system. So he's been out there monitoring temperatures to see if it would be suitable for Gila trout. So the Higgler Creek project I just mentioned briefly were these are the kind of upcoming projects that we're working on for Gila trout. We're looking still into doing compliance, environmental compliance, all the steps that need to go in to do a pesticide treatment, rotenone treatment, obtaining funding, of course, constructing the barrier, and then constructing the treatment. So these are all the kinds of things that are planned for that project, but we're still in pretty early stages of working through environmental compliance. Chase Creek is another really neat opportunity in the East Verde Range drainage, So here's Dude Creek, and here's the East Verde main stem, and here's Chase Creek. It had a small population of rainbow trout. It looked like it was feasible for us to remove them mechanically. And so we've had interns all summer up there removing rainbow trout, and we're hoping that maybe the stream would be fishless and we can stock it with Gila trout next year. And here's a couple pictures of the Cave Creek watershed, and like I mentioned, Mike has been looking at the temperatures to make sure that the water temperatures are still suitable for trout as well as the habitat. And then Mike has been really busy working on Gila trout recreational populations. So the Mora National Fish Hatchery in New Mexico is where Gila trout are raised, both for recreation and recovery. And we've been trying to develop opportunities over the years to have some of the recreational opportunities. So we started at Fry Mesa Reservoir, and now, as of last year, we stocked fish in West Fork Oak Creek as well as Goldwater Lake. And we're hoping to have more over the next few years. And this is going to help us gain some public support because sometimes it takes a while for recovery streams to open up to angling while you're waiting for that population to establish. So next, for Apache trout, our delisting goal is 30 populations. This over here to the left is all on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation, and this over here is what we work with on the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. And these are some of the streams that need a pesticide treatment in red. And one of these big ones right here is the West Fork of the Black River, and down here is Bear Wall, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. And this is showing all of the streams that we're currently working on the national forest. I don't think I have time to go through all of them, so I'll just mention a few of them, but the blue ones are the ones that are currently occupied, and then we do have a number that need some form of management action, whether it's a planned treatment or a new barrier or a stocking. And we've had similar challenges with Apache trout. We've had barrier failures before the wildfire, and then we had barrier failures after the wildfire. So these pictures on the left is our friend Kelly Meyer by the Fish Creek barrier many years ago, and then on the right it's the same picture, same location after the wildfire. So this was the only barrier that was really taken out, but some of our other ones were impacted as well. And I was just going to, oops, let me go back here, I'm sorry, show you a picture of what we deal with a lot of the time when we have very high flows, but hold on a minute. Okay, can you all see this picture here? This is a picture of one of our barriers after the wildfire. So these are the kinds of things that managers, especially our Region 1 and Pine Top fisheries staff, go out and evaluate all the time, or the efficacy of these barriers when you have really big flows like this, because this is when fish like to move. So I'll go back to the presentation now. There we go. So success by the numbers for Apache trout. We've constructed over 20 barriers since the 1980s, and this is just on the Apache Cypres. And we have 8 occupied streams right now, and 4 reestablishment projects are planned, and there are over 20 occupied streams on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation. So if you do the math, we're really close to 30 or over 30 populations, which is up to the delisting criteria. So our department, as well as the Fish and Wildlife Service, are really interested in looking more into that opportunity in the near future. Some of the upcoming Apache trout projects, we're going to stock a couple of fishless streams, do some barrier maintenance, and some barrier construction. So the West Fork of the Black River is a project, a big barrier project, that has been planned since probably the mid-early 1990s. And we finally were able to have that barrier constructed by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation in partnership with Game and Fish, as well as Fish and Wildlife Service and the Forest Service. That barrier was completed just this spring. We're planning on a pesticide treatment in next year, and then to restock that year or the following year. And this is a picture of the finished barrier right here from just about a month ago. And then our Bear Wallow Creek project, we are completely modifying the barrier that you see right now. We built this multiple years ago, and it turned out not to be high enough for trout. They were able to get over it. And we have a new design where we're basically reconstructing it. So we're working on all of the environmental compliance right now. We are seeking funding for that barrier, and then we will hopefully implement a pesticide treatment in 2018 or 19. And here are some of those recreational populations, just like you can fish for Gila trout, that we stock recreationally for Apache trout or some of the wild streams where you can catch them. Mike also developed the Arizona Trout Challenge in 2015 to really connect anglers with native and wild trout, and as well as some of our stocked trout species. There's 2 types of challenges where you can catch all 5 species of wild trout, or 6 of the total 8 trout species that we have in our state. We have a really neat new website that Mike developed to find out this information. And I was just going to show you really quick what that looks like if anyone hasn't seen it before. So this is our fishaz.org website, and the Trout Challenge is here. This is an interactive website where you can choose which species that you want to catch, and there's going to be an area where you can catch them. And you can zoom in to these areas and find out information about them. And it's all here, information as well, how to complete the challenge and all the steps. So that's a really good resource, and that's on our fishaz.org website as well. So I wanted to put a plug in for that really quick. And then one moment, I'm getting the presentation. There we go. And then we also have another new website that is for my program, our Native Aquatic Species program. It's our Native Aquatic Species blog called In the Current at inthecurrent.org. And we post things almost daily. Some of it we post for some of our field biologists or out in the field. We have Gila trout, chub. We have lots of native fish, snakes, and frog stories on there. So I recommend it if you're interested in these kind of species. And with that, I will take any questions if there's time.
There definitely is. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them in that chat box there. Or if you just want to speak your question, just go ahead and kind of raise your hand in the chat box and I'll unmute your line for you. All right, doesn't look like anything is coming in.
Okay.
I do have one question though. From the Western Rivers Action Network perspective, how can we best help you in this work? What can we be doing that will benefit native trout?
That's a good question. It seems like so much of what we do today that's helpful is communication. And so if we could find out, sometimes our circles don't entirely overlap. And maybe that's part of it is getting our website and your website together and to start spreading the word, because your goals for the Western Action Rivers is the same as what our goals are. We want to keep, cool water for these species and make sure that they have habitat to live in. If you have any suggestions as well on how we can partner, that'd be great.
Well, getting the word out sounds like a great first step. We have over 15,000 members in Arizona alone, so we can definitely help with that. We've got a couple other questions rolling in the chat box now. We've got one here from Todd asking, what is the meaning of recovery?
Sure. Well, for us, we define recovery as that species is no longer threatened with becoming endangered or becoming extinct in the future and can be taken off of the endangered species list. And that also allows that species to have fewer restrictions, as well as folks to be able to go out and angle these fish and enjoy them. So that is what we're looking for, is healthy, sustainable populations, as well as their habitat, and then fishable populations.
Okay, looks like all the other questions here are asking if we can have access to this presentation for some other educational uses. So I just want to remind folks that we will be including a PDF, I hope, and a recording of this session on the Western Rivers Action Network website. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Brad. Do we have you on the line there, Brad?
You do have me.
Good deal. You should be getting control over the screen here in a second.
All right, great. It's always good to have control.
Indeed. All right, looks like we've got you on.
The title screen on then?
Yes, sir.
Then I'm going to start. Julie, first thanks. And as Julie started with an acknowledgement of partners, that's really the only place to start in what I'm going to talk about today. Trout Unlimited has developed a new strategic plan, about a year ago. And one of our 5 priorities in that plan is we call the Southwest Native Trout Strategy. But I want to be really clear that that strategy is a collaborative strategy. We recognize that the Arizona Game and Fish Department, the New Mexico Game and Fish Department, the Colorado Game and Fish Department, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and many other angling groups and individuals are a key to the success of our strategy. But today I want to talk to you a little bit about what that Southwest Native Trout Strategy is, why we think it can be an important component of the recovery work that Julie's gone through, and I'll broaden it just a little from Arizona to explain to you a little bit about our work with Rio Grande cutthroats, which is our third species in our Southwest native trout strategy. So why should TU or why should anglers care about Southwest native trout, and why did that become one of our 5 conservation priorities? The first reason is there is a significant conservation need. Julie touched on that, and I'm going to touch on it a little bit, but as you'll see, these species, while we've made tremendous strides in recovery, they're still very imperiled, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's going to be a long process to ensure that we bring these fish back to. There's also significant partnerships. Julie touched on these. I touched on these. I will touch on these a little bit more. These partnerships have been in existence for years with the universities, with the state agencies, with the federal agencies. And that's just a primary necessary component for TU to engage in this, but more importantly for us to make real progress in this strategy. A third reason we chose it is we have tremendous interest from our own membership, from state leaders, from other groups that we work with in the state. And as Julie mentioned, these efforts have been ongoing for years. There's been great progress made, and then some of that lost due to both climatic and fire events. Tremendous citizen science opportunities. It's a great place for our members and other anglers and other wildlife enthusiasts to engage in monitoring and restoration work. And then finally, as we all know, we live on the front lines of climate change. When you think about Arizona and the Southwest, I don't think anyone, whether we can argue about causes for climate change, but I don't think any of us have any doubt about more wildfires, hotter and drier temperatures, and we think that puts these southwestern native fish right at the front of this discussions and battles about climate. Julie talked a little bit about each of these species, but I just want to show you that even though we've made great progress, if you take a look at Apache trout, we're at somewhere around 25% of the historical range is currently occupied. 5% for Gila trout, 11% for Rio Grande cutthroat trout. And I think what's maybe even more important than those percentages is that most of the main streams or the larger systems do not have native trout in them. Most of these fish are in small, isolated pockets at this point in time. And while we're lucky that we're able to place those fish in those areas, we clearly have some jeopardy for the species because of that. I just put a few pictures of a variety of projects across the Southwest. And I won't spend the time to go through all of those, but I think just a glance at that, and I could have put up 100 more. There are numerous partnerships between state, federal, universities, TU members, other angling groups that are all making a difference when it comes to Southwest native. Do the native trout strategy and point out a couple of items in that strategy that I think are particularly important. But our goal is that Apache, Gila, and Rio Grande cutthroat trout and their habitats will be sustainably conserved and expanded in the Southwest, resilient to climate change, well distributed, and with abundant fishable populations. And I think what's different about what we're talking about than what just recovery is, we're not talking about just bringing those species back where they meet the technical language of the Endangered Species Act. We want to see these fish expand. We want to see them be resilient to the climate change that's coming, but we want to see them be fishable populations. As Julie mentioned, I think the state shares that goal with us, but that's even a higher bar than just meeting the recovery standards. I would also tell you that this goal was developed with probably 30 people, including federal and state agencies, all trying to find language that they could agree on, and this is the lofty goal that we set for ourselves. We developed a business plan for Southwest Native. And what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes is just the investment that TU plans to make. We intend to fundraise, we intend to utilize our own funds, to utilize our staff time, but we're estimating over the next 5 years that we're going to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million. That doesn't count a lot of the work that Julie just talked about. We're not talking about the work that the federal agencies are doing, our state agencies are doing. We're talking about additional work, supplemental work, work that can help this overall recovery process. Our major themes for this new funding: communication. Julie touched on it, but we think that's an area that we can certainly enrich the current efforts. And I'll talk specifically in a minute about some of the things that we hope to do. Responding to climate change. I've touched on that already, but I think we all know how important that is. Building larger strongholds, strengthening resiliency, better response to drought, wildlife, and storm events, and increasing TU's and angler capacity, both to engage and our capacity staff-wise in the Southwest. Here are just a couple of things that we intend to do over the next 3 or 4 years. To develop a video or multi-videos on Southwest native trout. We already have one scheduled to be filmed this fall. It's going to focus on the Apache trout. We have some scheduled for next spring. Our intent is to make these a variety of these that we can use for multiple offices, but to raise the public's understanding of how important the species is to the history, these species are to the history of the Southwest, and what a special opportunity we have in terms of bringing these fish back. To improve stream monitoring network and to involve more of our members in citizen science. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on a later slide. To use our science team, working again with federal agencies and the state to help improve drought and wildfire risk management assessment, to develop best management practices, but to figure out ways that these fish can be more protected from, certainly from wildfires in the future. And then I just listed 3 areas. Julie already talked about the West Fork of the Black River for Apache. We're working on the West Fork of the Gila River for Gila trout, and for Rio Grande cutthroats, Rio Costilla in northern New Mexico. I showed you some of this, so I won't spend much time on it, but you can see historically Apache trout had about 600 miles of habitat, and we're significantly less than that today. Again, you can see that the wallow fire really had a significant impact on the recovery efforts, and thank goodness we're starting to make progress again, but it did set us back a few years with that 500,000 acre fire. Some specific through this strategy for Apache trout. We believe that some of the most important work that we can do is engage in high-level planning, and particularly the National Forest have multiple efforts underway that have the potential to have impacts on Apache trout and Gila trout and Rio Grande cuts, but focus on Apache trout. The 4-fry process is underway, the Tano National Forest Plan is underway, the Black River Forest Restoration Project's underway, the Cragen Watershed Project's underway, and all of those different multi-million acre planning processes we plan to engage in very deeply to ensure that habitats and fisheries are considered, and maybe more importantly from a RAND perspective is to really look at health of watersheds in our comments, and we're actively engaged as a stakeholder in the 4-fry process, and we intend to be actively engaged as stakeholders in these other processes. We're also working with the Game and Fish Department and the Fish and Wildlife Service, again with our science team, to revise the Apache trout monitoring plans. We're also working, and Julie mentioned it, but we've received a NIFWIF grant to update and kind of plug any holes in the U.S. Forest Service stream temperature monitoring network and some of the other monitoring that's underway. It's our vision to have kind of a seamless monitoring system through Arizona and New Mexico for all the key streams to make sure that we get reliable stream temperature information to aid the states as they make their decisions on stocking. We're working with the Forest Service in terms of looking at these temperature scenarios and what that's going to do to historical habitat, what that's going to do relative to streams that had historical, had populations of Apache trout historically, and we're trying to determine which ones with the changes in temperature can hold those fish into the future. We're also in the process of adding a new staff position in Arizona. It's being funded by the Weiss program, the Weiss Foundation, a Weiss Fellow. That position will do significant work relative to Southwest native trout. We're also trying to work in partnership with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, the West Fork of the Black River, and annually we host the Native Wild Trout Conference. And I think some of the folks on this call could correct me, but I think the upcoming one is the 7th one of those, and it's pretty remarkable to have 100+ people attend those conferences in Phoenix every year. Gila trout, again, over 600 miles historically. I won't go through the things that Julie already went through, but again, you can see where a significant fire in 2012 impacted portions of the habitat and really set us back in our overall recovery efforts, but great progress is being made. Julie showed you this map, but I think one of the key things that we're impressed with and that we think is a real opportunity is that there is a lot of unoccupied historic range in Arizona, and we look forward to working with all the partners in the state in expanding Gila trout in Arizona in the coming years. Again, I've just listed a few projects. Hagler Creek's one that TU and has been engaged with the state, and we look forward to continue that. We're going to do some communication work. We intend to put an article in Trout magazine next year on the Gila restoration efforts. We plan to write an article for Southwest fly fishing on the West Fork of Oak Creek this fall. And I already mentioned we're doing significant stream temperature and flow monitoring. We've received some funding from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do that. The remainder of those projects are in New Mexico, so I won't cover those, but just be aware we've received significant funding, both from a private donation, which was $100,000, and NIFWIF funding and other funding that's put over $200,000 for some of our work on Gila trout in New Mexico. And again, I'm just going to brush the Rio Grande cutthroat trout. It doesn't touch Arizona, but again, it's an important Southwest native trout. Again, you can see that it had a large range to begin with, very small range today. There's even there's been quite a discussion about whether this species should be listed, and there's some litigation about that at this point in time. And again, I won't walk you through all of the work, but again, significant work under the Southwest Native Trout Strategy in terms of trying to improve the strongholds, work on forest plans, and ensure that we've got a stronger, more resilient Rio Grande cutthroat trout populations in New Mexico. Now, many of you have seen this quote, but I think it sums up, at least from our perspective, why we think it's important that we can continue to work on native trout. Frank White, TU member in New Mexico, and wrote a book about native trout in Holy Ghost Creek. He said, I find it hard to believe that any exotic trout would do as well in the creek as the native cutthroat. Nature has fitted them for survival in what is at best a marginal habitat on the southern edge of trout country. They thrive and grow fat in a creek that's little more than a trickle. And I think that sums up, we believe that it just makes sense. It makes ecological sense, it makes historical sense, and we think ultimately it'll make sense to the anglers and enthusiasts, trout enthusiasts in Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado to have the opportunity to participate both in the recovery and ultimately in recreational angling for these unique, hardy southwestern trout. And with that, I'd stop there and open it up for any questions.
All right, looks like we have a couple in the chat box. So we've got Jeff Collins here. I noticed there's nothing shown for the Gila trout and the Pinaleños. I was involved in getting that started. It's been successful and it was identified as historic waters. Why isn't it on the map? Any thoughts, Brad or Julie?
I'm not sure if that question is for Brad or I, but it was on my maps.
Okay. I have one question as long as we're talking about the maps. So at Western Rivers Action Network, one of our priorities is to keep our members engaged in the Arizona Department of Water Resources ongoing planning process. And one of the ways we're doing that is they've been putting together these planning areas across the state, and they're holding meetings in each of these planning areas to determine priorities and to come up with strategies. And we've been building a map of our own where we're overlaying a lot of our sort of riparian and wildlife resources that are water contingent with their areas. And I saw, Julie, you had a couple great maps with historic trout ranges and current trout projects. Brad, you mentioned a lot of work and partnership that you're doing with the Forest Service. And I was just wondering if any of that data can be made available.
Probably. I think it would just be a matter of exactly what data you're looking for, and we could get in touch and see if we could, contribute.
Very cool. Well, I'll talk to you behind the scenes about that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any problem with that.
Very cool. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone's line in case there's any questions that way. It might be a little chaotic, so bear with me. All right, everybody's open. Does anyone want to chime in or have any questions?
It's been great. Appreciate it.
And there's the feedback, so let's put you guys back on mute. Cool. Well, it sounds like everybody has gotten everything out. If any questions come up later, feel free to reach out to either myself or to Sarah Luna. I'll go ahead and put up her email address for you here. There we go. So her email address is at the bottom there if you have anything you want to follow up with. You'll also see there a link to the Western Rivers Action Network Facebook and homepage and events page. If you're not already a member, feel free to sign up, and please do so. It'll help us keep you up to date on ongoing actions you can take and things like our day at the legislature. And also sign up for our next webinar. It is on the 21st, and it'll be about river funding and restoration efforts with Jennifer Pitt from Audubon and Scott Deeney from the Nature Conservancy. With that, I think that's all for today, so thank you all again, and thanks to our presenters as well.